Today I'm speaking with Cait Flanders. Cait is a Canadian writer. She first gained recognition with her blog, Blonde on a Budget, where she documented her journey of paying off $30,000 in debt. That was back in 2011. That experience became the foundation for her exploration of minimalism, mindful consumption, intentional living, which she writes about today. She later wrote a best-selling book, The Year of Less, where she took on a year-long shopping ban that transformed her relationship with money and possessions, which is something that would probably benefit all of us. Since then, she's written Adventures in Opting Out, which helps readers navigate big life changes and forge their own paths. She also shares her insights through her newsletter, The Lighthouse, where she explores personal growth, mindfulness, things like that. I wanted to have her on here today because the themes that she writes about, like breaking free from debt, rethinking consumerism, living a more intentional life, they're very powerful, and I think they're very applicable from a personal finance perspective. So, Cait, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Also, what a great introduction. I love thinking back to Blonde on a Budget days. So that was fun.
Yeah, so going back to then, so I mean, I it was an inspirational story. You paid off 30 grand worth of debt. So how'd that debt happen? Like what before you did that, what was that debt composed of?
Yeah, so I mean, gosh, even reflecting on the time period, like 2011, I was 26 years old. And so you might think that it would be like student loans or something like that. And if I remember correctly, I think maybe like 3 or 5 thousand of it was like a small student loan. But honestly, the majority of it was just straight up consumer debt. And it came from years of, I mean, there's a couple different things. Like one, definitely not really understanding how to, I guess, like budget for and live within my means. So I just, used credit to kind of help me get life set up. And in some ways, you have to set up a life when you move out and especially like I moved into my own place at some point and you need to buy some things to get yourself going. But yeah, it's like I utilized credit to get myself set up, but then a big one for me is that I also back then I used to I'll just say like drink a lot more, and I was someone who was all too comfortable. Like once I'd had a few drinks, I would happily put say like the tab for me and my friends like on my credit card for some reason. And I could go on and on about that, but that was something that I did back then that I can't even imagine. Like it's sort of like me today looks back on that. I'm like, who did I think I was? What was I doing? So yeah, it's not that I was necessarily a huge shopper, but yeah, just always spent more than I earned and definitely spent too much on kind of drinking and partying.
Yeah, so I can completely relate. Like we were talking about before the podcast, like I went through the exact same thing at the exact same age. My debt was very similar. So I completely relate. I think a big part of it is
Mm,
like you're at that age, you're in a real rush to be a grown up. And like you want to say,
mm.
like, oh, look what I can do. I can get a new car. I can get this cool place. I can pay for everything tonight. Yeah, it's a weird kind of it's just a weird moment in your life that I think can easily go awry.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because it's like not everyone does that. I can kind of reflect on the fact like I had friends who were really openly frugal at the time. And it's like, but I just didn't live that way. It is probably like what you're describing. Like you want to be an adult. And I think it's a little, I guess it is a little childish when you reflect on it, but it's like I just wanted what I wanted. And so that wasn't always like extravagant, but let's say like I wanted to be able to go for a takeout coffee whenever I wanted, or you wanted to go out for dinner, you want to do these things, and I just did, and then put it all on credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2011, you go through all of that, you've accumulated all this debt, you've been living that way, and then you make this decision and you're like, I'm going to stop. And then you start a blog, Blonde on a Budget, where you document paying off this debt. So, what inspired you to start it? And then did you ever expect it to gain a big following?
Oh yeah, good two-parter question. Okay, so the first one. well, this probably won't be surprising and will actually probably make a lot of sense to you, but I mean, I started it very like simply from the standpoint of I wanted to like document paying off debt, and I didn't even really know what that looked like, but it was like I want to get rid of this. Like I don't want to be in this amount of debt. I want to pay it off. And for some reason, maybe it's just like the era that we were in, it's like that is when blogging was huge, or or like a lot of people had blogs. And so I don't know exactly why I chose that route, but that was what I wanted. I just wanted to document it, and if anyone read, maybe there'd be a little bit of accountability. But what you might relate to is like I wrote anonymously at first. I started the blog in October, I think, and it took like a year and a half, maybe even a little bit more, for me to finally put my first name, and not even my full name, just my first name on it. It took a long time. So because there was I had so much shame about the debt. I didn't want anyone in my real life to know about it. I didn't want anyone to find me. And yeah, so I wrote anonymously, and it did what it needed to do. It made it that it was like it felt safe for me to write, for me to share numbers. There were a lot of anonymous personal finance bloggers that I eventually found. Like I actually feel like most people, and this might even still be true today for a lot of people, like anonymity seems to be a big thing in the personal finance world. But there were a lot of us. There were a lot of people, whether it was like documenting paying off debt, or maybe someone's saving to buy a house, or whatever it might have been. There were a lot of people who wrote anonymously. So I made a lot of online friends, and that was really cool. But to answer the question, did I ever think it would like get a big following? No. Like, I don't and like I'm grateful that I never thought that, and also in a way that I didn't want that, because I think for me it meant then that the writing and like everything I did was it was just so much more authentic. Like I was just being myself, and I wasn't worrying about any of that. Or like there was no pressure to grow it into something. So no, I had absolutely no idea that it would become what it did.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's because like personal finance and money are still like very taboo topics. Like you'll talk to people and they'll go off about the most wild things in their personal life, but then, you'll never hear them say like, well, do you have credit card debt? Do you how much money
Yep.
you have in your 401k? Like people just are very uncomfortable talking about that subject, I think.
Well, I think you're right, and also it doesn't seem to matter sort of where you are in your financial life. Like it just seems to be true across the board. It's like it doesn't matter. Like it could be that you have a bunch of debt. It could be that you actually have a lot of money in savings and investments, or you're just somewhere in the middle. There is definitely something that comes up. There's shame, there's class issues, there's stories we've been told. Like there's so much. But yeah, so anyways, I was one of the anonymous ones way back in the day.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that the blogging, it does help with accountability. So on the website, you wrote detailed like weekly spending reports, like everything that you spent that week. You got into a very in-depth level of detail. So you mentioned, it helped with accountability. Do you think that was like a major thing that helped you? Do you think that putting all that online and being so detailed helped with your debt payment journey?
Okay, well, first off, you've done your research because yes, I did do weekly spending reports, and they were very detailed. You're right. Like I would literally write like if I'd spent $5 at Starbucks or whatever, I wrote it all down. I think it did two things. I definitely think that accountability was there because, and maybe there's people out there who would lie. I don't know, but it was like for me, there was a feeling of I need to be honest. I think too, because like I was tracking also the debt repayment. And so like if anyone really wanted to calculate it, they'd be able to figure out the numbers, like so yeah, there was something in accountability and honesty, but I think like even kind of more than that, the fact that I would write those things every week, and I would also do monthly budgets, and I would kind of do one at the start of the month, and at the end of the month I would share what my spending had actually been. I think all of it just helped me learn about my own patterns, and start to understand like some of the stories I tell myself, or I say I want this thing, but I can't seem to make that happen. Well, then I look at the numbers and I try to figure out like what's going on or where's my money actually going. So I think it was like accountability to others, but also I was just being really honest with myself for the first time. And numbers have a great way of doing that. Like you can't really hide from them when you know the actual numbers. Like there's a lot of information there.
Yeah, it's very intimidating when you start doing that and you actually like write it all down and you see the full extent of the problem. It can be very, very intimidating. So in the journey of paying off the debt, like what would you say are like the top strategies you used at that time?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's like top strategies and things I did but wouldn't actually recommend. Like, because I think there is a mix, I think the best thing I did was what we've talked about here, which is like keeping track of my spending and budgeting. And sometimes it wasn't so much budgeting to like force myself to stick to any number, but just like categorizing all my spending so I understood where everything was at least going. So I do think like those were incredibly helpful. I also back then, it's like I think at the very beginning I did some debt consolidation because I think like I probably had maybe like two credit cards or something, maybe even three. And I remember getting, I think it was a small loan and like paying off maybe like two of them, like with that. So then it was like, doing what I could, I guess, like with my age and sort of the credit you have at that age, doing what I could to minimize some of the interest I might be paying, which would then help me pay things off a bit earlier. But there's also things I did that I wouldn't really recommend to people. I think like the 2 years it took me to pay that debt off, like I was so restrictive with my spending. I remember like I wouldn't even let myself go get a haircut. I didn't even like kind of think like, oh, there's a place I could just go down the road and it'd only be 20 bucks. Like I didn't really think about that. I just kind of thought like all discretionary spending's like off the table. And it was actually too much because like my reflection on the other side of it was I still had so much shame about it all. And yes, the debt had been paid off, but I also really had deprived myself during that process.
Interesting. Do you think that like that deprivation was some kind of like penance for like because that's kind of how it was for me. Like I went very extreme too. And I almost think I was like I thought of it as like I'm paying some kind of penance for excesses of the past.
100%. It's like
Yeah.
if we even talk about like how like I said, it started from a place of I had so much shame. I wrote anonymously because I didn't want anyone in my life to know about my debt. Then because like for me too, like the reason I had to start paying off my debt was because I literally was maxed out. There was no extra. I think I had like $100 or $115 left on my credit limit, and we're talking like $30,000, and I had 100 left. And so all of a sudden, like you are just faced with this reality that like you cannot keep spending the way that you have been, and you actually have to do something about it because like I've hit my point. So I think with all of that, it definitely made it so that I started from a place of like you've done something wrong, and so now you need to pay it all off. And yeah, so it's like I think like I wish I hadn't been so hard on myself. I wish like honestly too, like sometimes I look back and like if I wonder what would have happened if I'd given myself 3 years to pay it off. And I had also had a little bit of a life during that process, and like it's okay that I didn't, but it's just sort of like if then I'm going forward and someone's like, "Oh, what's your advice for paying off debt?" I'm like, "Don't completely deprive yourself." Like that I don't recommend that as a strategy.
That leads into my next question. So I was curious what you would like if you're talking to someone today, they're in a lot of debt, tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt, and they want to pay it off. Like, what would you recommend to them? Like, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, I think that one would definitely be looking into ways you could consolidate debt because I think the reason I even start there is because I think that we have this tendency when we are facing a lot of debt, you do just kind of want to stick your head in the sand a little bit and pretend it's not there because you don't want to face it, right? And actually, I think like the most empowering thing you can do to get started is to realize you do have options. There are options out there, even if it means like you're utilizing just kind of like different credit options, but they're there for a reason. You know, consolidation loans exist for a reason. There are responsible products we can use to help us get out of these situations, pay some less interest, and help get us started. And so I think like doing some research about options that will help you get going. I actually think that's incredibly empowering. You learn a bit about money, you learn about some different products maybe, and you start to develop a little bit of plan. And so then you start to see like, okay, yes, I have this debt, but I'm also in control. Like I get to figure out the strategy I'm going to use to start paying some of it off. So I would definitely look at like first, I guess it's like face your numbers. Second is are like figure out if there are ways to consolidate some of it just so you're not paying as much interest. And then yeah, it's like make a bit of a budget, something like start to understand your numbers. I mean, like I didn't know anything about budgeting at first. I basically just tracked my spending for 3 months. And at the end of those 3 months, I went through and I literally did this like in a notebook. I wasn't publishing this anywhere yet. I would do this in a notebook and I was just like tracking it on paper. And then after 3 months, I went through and added all these things up to understand like, yeah, the different categories of my spending and how much I spent on average over those 3 months. And I just started from there. So there was no, oh, I'm punishing myself, I guess, at first to like understand my spending. I was just trying to figure out like, what is my spending? Like, how much do I spend on things? And basically, it's just like really facing all the numbers and remember that you can figure out like a way out of this. Because I think that's the hard part too, is like debt can feel so crippling for people at all different levels. You know, I've had people who have told me they've had like $5,000 or $10,000 worth of debt and that they feel so much shame about that. They don't know how to move forward. And I would look at that, and especially now as I'm getting older, I'm like, $5,000 of debt, that doesn't feel like a thing. Because I'm like, I know that I could make a quick little plan and pay it off. But it's so different for all of us. And so just really looking at your numbers, accepting them, and yeah, and just start figuring out what might work for you to help pay it off.
Yeah, that's good advice. And most people don't keep a budget. Like most people, I think, get their check, they spend it, or they spend more than that. And they don't really think about, they're not really mindful about like where it's all going. Like they just say like, oh, here's what I have. I'm just going to spend it on whatever. If it's there, I'm going to spend it. So I think that's really good advice. What do you think about like, and this, we'll get to this stuff later when we talk about decluttering and minimalism and stuff, but
Sure.
what do you think about like a quick cash infusion? Like that was something I did at the time. So for me, it was 2008. I had a huge DVD collection that I sold on eBay, and you could get good price. At that point, DVDs were still valuable, and you could get a good price on it. But I sold a lot of my possessions on eBay. Like, what do you think about that of quickly getting like a good cash infusion by selling some things?
Definitely. I guess I'm always quick to go to numbers and just trying to understand them because I guess like I know that can be the hardest part for some people. But yes, I'm like, I definitely think like it's not true for everybody, but it's pretty common for us to have something around the house that like we don't really need, or like an asset that we don't understand as an asset. So yeah, definitely.
So when you were going through this, there must have been moments, like I know I went through them, like where it was just so hard. Like what were some of the things that helped you stay on track?
Gosh, it's almost hard to remember. I think like in a lot of ways, the like accountability and I guess like community helped. So I do remember like I would hit little points where maybe all of a sudden I found out I owed something for taxes, or like you get like a bill you're not expecting, which in your mind then it has now derailed your strategy. Maybe it's really only derailed it for a month or two, but like it feels so big because like the stakes feel so high. And I do think like for me a lot of it came down to just like talking to people. So I'd write about it, talk about it in the comments. And yeah, I still like, for most of those 2 years that I was paying off the debt, I still didn't talk to friends or family all that much, but I definitely talked to like online friends. So yeah, I would probably sum it up as that.
Awesome. And so, now we're getting into the work, more of the work that you're doing now. So it started off like very tactical, like you're focused on paying off debt and budgets and that kind of thing. But from that, you've developed an entire like philosophy about life. So, from that, looking back to when the debt was paid off, like what did that journey teach you about life and how did it lead to your current philosophies?
Well, I guess it depends on what all the different, yeah, kind of philosophies or beliefs might be. But I think that one thing that started to become really apparent, especially as I wrote, and I guess the way that I wrote, was that I started to understand that something that was true for me and my strategy that did seem a little bit different, I guess, compared to what I was seeing online was I did really focus on mindfulness almost like subconsciously. Like I don't think I would have told you that that was something I was or like that was kind of inherently inside me. But the way I would talk about numbers, like I was just trying to be mindful about my spending. I didn't want to, I guess like I'm not maybe like an overly analytical person. In a lot of ways, I'm probably a much more emotional person. But what then becomes true from that is like I find I've had to learn a lot of grounding techniques over the year and things that, yeah, like, yeah, help keep me grounded and keep me focused in ways that are right for me. And so, yeah, mindfulness just kind of became part of it. So I would talk about mindful spending, mindful budgeting. There was a lot of like shame-free talk about it. So even though like that was something I'd really struggled with, I could understand that it wasn't healthy and also just like wasn't productive, like that your shame isn't actually productive. And so, yeah, we talk about like just knowing your numbers is what's important. Like, you're not always going to, have some quote unquote perfect budget. Life has other plans sometimes. That's okay. And it keeps coming back to just stay aware. Like, just keep staying aware of the numbers. That's what's important. Like, don't put your head back in the sand. Just make sure you're understand what's happening. So yeah, I think that started to just naturally happen in my writing. I don't know that I knew that until I'd been doing it for a few years, but it's like I guess something other people could see and say that they appreciated, and yeah, and has then since been just naturally part of anything that I write about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think mindfulness is a big part of it. Like, definitely, like, I think what leads to a lot of debt is kind of mindless spending. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when you start, I think when you just start the process of thinking through, like, where is this money going? Why am I spending this? Like, that's a huge step forward, I think.
Yeah, and I think I started to learn a lot, and we can talk more about this when we talk about maybe like the shopping ban and year of less and stuff. But it's like I feel like I started, especially through writing, but also just living differently. It was like I started to understand the different stories that I would tell myself. And so like I really learned how to tune in to, I guess, in my inner world, but then how that would potentially affect my financial life. And that was something again, like I don't think and still don't think I see that much in kind of personal finance content.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the year of less. So I read the book, I loved it, thought it was great. What
Mm.
inspired that? What inspired? So, for those who aren't aware, Year of Less is a book where you told your personal story and you talked about the year where you stopped spending money, you stopped shopping. So what was the inspiration behind a year-long shopping ban?
Yeah. So I guess going back to what we were talking about with my debt repayment journey and how really I had like kind of deprived myself and not let myself have any, I mean, we call it fun money, discretionary spending, whatever, like just living money. Like in those 2 years, what happened is that once I was debt free, I basically started spending all my money again. And so I wasn't going back into debt. That's actually kind of a common misconception is like some people think I did the shopping ban to pay off debt, but it's like, no, I was debt free. So I wasn't going back into debt, but I just was kind of spending all my money. And so I would write these budgets, like I was still doing that on the blog. I would write a budget and plan for saving, say, 20%, sometimes 30% of my income. And then I would get to the end of the month, and sometimes I had saved 10, sometimes 5, sometimes nothing. And I would kind of reflect on that and be like, what is happening here? Like, why can't I seem to save anything? And yeah, like where I could see where the money's going, but like, why am I spending all of this? Like, what's actually happening here? And also then noticing that it just wasn't feeling good. Like, I did genuinely want to save, so why couldn't I save? So actually, like the shopping ban, it was strictly like a financial challenge in a lot of ways. I wanted to understand, yeah, why I was spending everything again. Because keep in mind, like saving even say 20% should have been completely doable because when I was paying off debt, there were months where I would put up to 55% of my income towards debt repayment. And so like saving 20 should have been easy if I were to just compare those numbers. But yeah, so like it was strictly like a financial challenge at first. I wanted to understand like why I was spending the way that I was. I didn't, I guess, like make a plan to buy nothing. There were rules to it. So it was kind of like obviously you can buy toiletries and like things if you've run out of them, you need them. If there's a thing you actually need, like I just wanted to, I guess, learn to understand what true needs were. So like if there's a thing I actually needed, that was fine. I also wrote like a short list of a few things that I could buy and kind of like knew I could, like looking ahead to the year, like knew I wanted to buy for myself, but there were a lot of things I couldn't buy. And yeah, but it was truly just an experiment of like figuring out why I spend the way that I do. I think I wrote something like that I wanted to learn how to be a mindful consumer, even though I don't think I really understood what that term meant at the time. Like I was just like throwing words around. But yeah, it was a totally financial challenge to start.
Awesome. And yeah, I think that like there's a lot of mindless spending that happens. I think like for a lot of people, they just get bored and they go on Amazon and they start buying random stuff. So yeah, I think that was kind of like a key crux of that. Anyway, so you mentioned that there were rules to it, like you would only buy things that you actually need. Like, do you want to get a little bit into that? Like, what were some of those specific rules of the shopping ban?
Yeah, sometimes I think I need to like open the book and revisit. But okay, so things I couldn't buy, because I do remember I wrote like a few different lists. So like things I couldn't buy, things I could buy, and then like I was saying, there was a short list of like very specific things I knew looking ahead, like I would want to try and shop for. So like that list was stuff like I think there was like winter boots. I really like a bigger ticket one was like I really wanted to buy a new bed. I think my bed was like 10 or 14 years old or something like that. So I was like, I really wanted to buy myself a new bed. And yeah, I don't know. Like I think there was maybe a couple clothing items or something that I could look ahead and think like I will need these in the next year. But yeah, the other lists were longer. So I couldn't buy any day kind of like clothes, shoes. A big one for me was books. And actually we could talk about like books ended up being kind of the only challenge for me of the whole thing. So like books, electronics, appliances, like again, like unless something I really like I already had and it broke and like you really needed it, like I could replace things, but I couldn't just shop for whatever. And then the things I could buy, yeah, it's like toiletries. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Basic things you need around the house. And like obviously like someone asked me was like, "Oh, does that mean you didn't buy groceries?" I'm like, "No." Like I bought all consumables. Like it's like food
Yeah.
was fine. I put gas in my car. Like it, I still did all of that. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to spend. I basically just had this thought like I don't want to bring things into my home like unless I really need them. I want to understand like what true needs are. And that's where then I guess like the minimalism piece part of it came in because I also kind of looked around my home and I was able to recognize like I owned a bunch of things that I was never using, and some of that was just books. And I think as a reader and an author, you're always going to have more books than you're ever going to read, and that's fine. But I could look at like there were different things like for sort of like hobbies I thought I might take up or just stuff like that. And but I could look around and be like, I have all this stuff I don't even use. Like I just think I don't need to buy stuff this year. And like let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of your spending, and I think everybody's spending, is that like it's tied into emotions. So It's something that people do to deal with emotions. So, and there's a lot of things people do to deal with emotions, but I think a big one today is kind of compulsive online shopping. So when you would shop, like what were some of the emotional triggers and like how did you manage that? Like, there's something triggered you to go and buy stuff that you didn't really need. So like what do you think were some of the things that triggered that?
Yeah, so I think, I would never have known this because I wasn't paying attention to it in the moment necessarily. But once I wasn't allowed to shop, like once that was off the table, yeah, you do start to notice like the stories that come up and almost the things that prompt you to make purchases. So sometimes it would be something like, oh gosh, what's a good example? I'm thinking maybe like for things like maybe hobbies or like little crafts or like things that I might pick up, I think some of that came from places where almost like you just have this image of like you'd somehow be a more interesting person if you did these other things. I don't quite know how to articulate that anymore, but it's like because I don't feel that now. Like I don't I guess I care what anyone thinks, but I think in your 20s, like you're figuring all of that out. And yeah, I think like I thought it'd be cool to be the kind of person who was into photography. So I remember buying like a DSLR, not like a super expensive one, but $500 or whatever it was. Like that was way more than I really had at the time when I had bought it. So, you buy things like that or certain like say like painting things. Again, just thinking like I did love to paint as a kid. It'd be cool to get back into that, but like I didn't actually have a plan for it. So sometimes it was just, yeah, this feeling of like kind of like life is feeling boring. I need something new. I need something interesting. But I think like what I recognized more than anything during the shopping ban is that most of the time I would be prompted to buy things when I wasn't in a great mood. So like when things weren't going very well, I was having a hard day, I was down in some way. I remember when I was writing the first draft of the book, I remember my editor asking if I could include an example of a time I bought things like to celebrate myself. So like, oh, maybe you got a promotion at work or you got whatever and you just bought something to celebrate. And I had to say like, I can't include that because that's not the kind of spender I've ever been. Like I actually have a like
Okay.
I don't celebrate myself enough. And that's like still true today. Like it's not something that I naturally go to of like, oh yes, I should celebrate myself. I should buy something to honor this or like, yes, I've gotten a raise. I deserve this. Like I've never been that kind of shopper. Mine was much more if I was sad, if I lonely, if you feel rejected, if you're heartbroken, like whatever it might be, like those were more of the prompts for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everybody's got different triggers, I think, that cause that, but everybody has them. So,
Mm-hmm.
something else I can relate to you about, which we were also talking about, is we both quit drinking around the same time we
Mm.
started paying off debt. So, how did, cleaning up your debt, quitting shopping, stopping drinking, like how did all that impact your emotional well-being and your mindset?
It's almost like how much time do we have?
Yeah, big questions. Sorry.
Yeah. But no, I think, I think there's one thing that it's almost like has to be said is that when I started each of these things, I think they were really hard at first, right? So we've been talking about spending, and so I can say like, the first few months of the shopping ban were like I'd say the first four or so, those were basically the hardest of the whole thing. Except actually later in the year, my parents got divorced, and that was a huge shock to the system. Like nobody saw
Oh
it
wow,
coming,
yeah.
and so like I really grieved that. Like it felt like I had a really hard time actually like with my parents' divorce because it was so unexpected to me. And so I actually think like the shopping ban was pretty hard for a bit of that as well. But honestly, like the beginning of the shopping ban was the hardest because that's when you're faced with your triggers first. And that means that you're like then facing your emotions for the first time and you have to sit with them and you can't do anything. Now, yeah, I had stopped drinking like 18 months before I started the shopping ban. So there were definitely almost like, yeah, there were two things happening at the same time because I think even 18 months in, like I definitely trusted that like I was going to not drink, like, you know, like that felt like the right path for me. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden like life got better because like again, what I was able to recognize is I think most of my drinking, not all of it, but I think like a lot of my drinking revolved around hard days. And I was definitely using it to make myself feel better. And so I think those, like, yeah, like the first couple of years with not drinking were definitely the hardest because you have to face things. And I say this is somewhere in the book, but like I definitely feel like the biggest thing that came out of me with the whole shopping ban was that I just had to face my feelings for the first time. So like I've had people ask questions like, oh, you know, like if yeah, you couldn't shop and you couldn't drink and yeah, you're having a hard day, like what did you do? And I'm like, I cried a lot. I was like that is the most honest answer I can give people. I'm like, that's what I'm like, there were parts of it that were really hard. And it's not because I couldn't shop. Like it has nothing to do with like, oh, I can't buy things. Same way, it's not really about drinking or not drinking. It's like I just had to face like really hard feelings and I had to actually feel them. And yeah, so it's like honestly, the beginning is hard. It's hard to face all that stuff. Like there's a reason that you drink or there's a reason that you shop. And when you take it all away, you have to just start facing the things that are really happening. I don't even know if that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. I mean, I think a lot of people do these things as a response to, you know, like for me, it was very similar. I had a hard day. Okay, I'm going to drink. And then I think everybody's got like some kind of vice where it's like, oh, I had a hard day. I'm going to have a cigarette or I'm going to have a drink or I'm going to, you know, in more extreme cases, some people are doing drugs to do that. Like they're coping with things. And even shopping is an example of that. Like people will shop to deal with something. And yeah, it's none of it is healthy, especially when it's taken to an extreme. So what are some of the healthy alternatives that people can use? So, you know, you quit drinking, you stop shopping. These were responses to negative things. Like when those things happen, like what do you think are some healthier ways to cope with that instead of doing it in a more negative way?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is probably so cliche now, especially in the world of like, we are just bombarded with self-help content these days. I feel like that's like all social media is at this point is like either ridiculous videos or it's like self-help and like therapy videos. I
Yeah.
think. But I would say that like the things that have helped me, like I guess in a way, like it started with like talking to friends more. So just like talking with people and opening up about feelings more. An extension of that then is if you can afford it or can find different ways to afford it or different alternatives, different resources, I will always vouch for the idea that people go to therapy if it feels like something they're open to. I didn't do any of that in the beginning. Like I quit drinking in 2012. I had to like think about that. 2012 and I don't think I saw a therapist for the first time until 2017. So this is even like post shopping ban. But I do think it's like invaluable if you find someone that you like talking to that yeah, whatever you can get, like it's worth. And then the other one is like I spend a lot of time outside. And I think some of that is, you know, I definitely believe in, I guess like it's not like meant to be maybe a coping mechanism, but like I know that if I feel anxious, like if I do something to get into my body instead, and it can be just a walk, like it's not like I have to go and like have some intense workout or hike for 5 hours. Like I don't have to do really intense work, but like just going for a walk, getting out of my head, being a little bit more in my body, that always helps me. And yeah, like I was never someone who spent time outside. That was not a thing that I did. You know, maybe when I was a kid up until like 12, 13, but that's when I started drinking. And so it just kind of all stopped. And I think it's interesting that basically when I quit drinking, I started spending more time outside. And I still do today. So I would definitely recommend that.
Awesome. Yeah, both are very good advice. So when you talk about a shopping ban, so I would think that most people would think of that as deprivation. But I mean, what I got from your book was that you didn't really think of it as deprivation. And I don't really think it is. Like when you think about it, like, we're living in wealthy countries. We're not really deprived of anything, like compared to how a lot of the rest of the world lives. So like how would you reframe that where you don't think of it as deprivation and you think of it as a more of a positive experience?
Yeah, I think in some ways it comes down to maybe both the rules that you set for yourself. Like if it felt like a challenge you wanted to try, I guess it's like being really mindful of the rules so that it doesn't feel like complete deprivation. I think, I didn't add this or think to kind of share this, but something that I did do that year was I really focused on saving, right? So it's like what happened is like two things. One, I all of a sudden, because I wasn't shopping, I all of a sudden had all this money to spend on travel. And travel was something I had always wanted to do, but I could never afford it. And now that I had money, I could travel. So I started doing a lot more travel, but I also built up savings. And by the end of it, I had enough that I felt comfortable. I also had work lined up, but I had enough that I was comfortable with the idea of quitting my job and attempting to be self-employed. So I think like I didn't feel necessarily deprived because I was getting to do something I really wanted, which was travel. And then also this amount of money started accumulating, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I've never been someone who had savings before. Like, this is really interesting. And then seeing like savings gives you options. So it didn't feel like deprivation during it. But then I think the other one is being really mindful of how you begin. So you can set rules and all of that and try this thing. But I do believe if you start from a place of like, I'm going to do a shopping ban basically because like I'm screwing up my spending and I need to like sort myself out. I think you're starting from a place that's not going to lead to anything good. And I also think that's often why people will come back to me and they'll be, oh, I tried one. And, after a month or two, I stopped doing it. But like, I'm just in such a bad situation. And like people get really stuck in this thing, this punishment, like we were talking about with the debt repayment. It's like I don't think this should be taken on as a punishment for whatever your financial situation is. I think like take it as an experiment first and foremost. Like it's not even something you have to stick to. If you go to the end of like say 3 months and you're like, wow, this is really interesting. I learned a lot about myself. I feel like that's a success. Like I don't think you have to do 12 months or whatever in order for it to count. So I think like, yeah, just being really mindful of why you're doing it, treating it as an experiment, take it as an opportunity, just like learn about yourself, learn about what you actually care about, what you actually want to be spending money on. And I think it'll be a lot more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of people would benefit from doing it for a short period of time. Like even just try a week, try a month of not buying things you don't need. Yeah, I think a lot of people would benefit from that.
Or just like different experiments. Like we don't have to get into it because it can be like quite political right now, but like right now it seems to be a really big thing, or like the hot trend is like everyone's like, I'm done with Amazon, right? Like, but actually just like say you're someone who it could be Amazon, could be anything that you kind of like have a subscription for. What happens if you cancel it for 30 days? Like, what do you learn? And so don't take it as like, oh, I have to do this or I can never buy from there again. But just like, what happens if you just don't use it for 30 days? Like, what can you learn from an experiment like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I don't have Amazon on my phone because I found when I had it on my
Mm.
phone, I would just kind of like I would get bored, look through the app. Oh, that looks cool. I'll get that.
Oh, yeah. You
And
can always find something.
I click buy it now and boom, it's there a day later. Yeah, and I think just not having it on your phone is probably helpful. Yeah, I know something I used to do. Like I would buy a lot of like kind of household essentials on Amazon. Like I'd
Mm-hmm.
look at, oh, I need some Lysol. Okay, boom, buy it. But it was way better when I started just keeping a grocery list. Like if I thought of that, I'd
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I'll add that to a grocery list. Like what a concept. No, instead
But
of
it's so true. Like it's so true. It's all just, I mean, some of this stuff, what we're talking about too, is just like we just live in a world that has these systems, and the systems are there to make things convenient. And sometimes it's to save money or for them to make money. And sometimes it literally is more convenient based on where we live or how we live. So I really, even like with the Amazon one, because I'm actually trying to not use Amazon, but I'm not doing it from like, I'm never using it again. It's like, I'm actually just doing what you're doing, which is like, I'm adding things to my grocery list. Like, it's okay to wait a week until I go to the store, then I'll get it.
Right. And it's often way cheaper at the store than it is to, buy it now on Amazon. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And then like sometimes you'll get to the grocery store and you're like, oh, do I really need that?
exactly,
That happens a
exactly.
lot too. So something else I'm curious about. So how did your social life change when you stopped shopping? So like a lot of people would think some of this stuff is kind of socially isolating, but I don't really think you had that experience. So how did your social life change when you stopped shopping?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't isolating. I feel like one thing that was true, or I guess like an experience that did happen more than once that I really noticed was actually more, it's almost like other people treating you kind of like you're a weirdo. I think so, like almost like other people
Yeah.
isolating you, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So like I didn't, my life didn't feel isolating at all. And so the positive bits were I think I spent a lot more time with people. I think that I really understood not only like was travel a huge priority, but like building and maintaining my friendships and my relationships with my family were so important to me. It's like I actually feel like I spent a lot more time with people, a lot more meaningful time, especially with the travel. Like I got to go see friends largely. I was in the States a lot. Like I was visiting friends and, like getting to spend time with people that I wouldn't normally get to. And all of that was lovely. But yeah, I think more than anything, because at the time I was still working full time and most of that I was remote, but I would fly across the country to Toronto, go into the office, and the first thing I would notice is so many people's screens. They were not their work, they were shopping websites. And it was fascinating to see how even when people are working, they're also thinking, I need a new lamp, like for my living room. And so they're like pulling up things and browsing things, or like, oh, here's this jacket I'm thinking of buying. What do you think of this? Like there was a lot of that.
That's
Oh,
true.
go
Like
ahead.
whenever I walk around like an office, you will always see someone with Amazon up buying something. That's
Yes,
100% true.
someone is buying something at work. So I would notice that. And sometimes I felt like a weirdo for that in those moments because you're kind of like, oh, I can't relate because I'm not in that place right now. Like I'm not browsing for anything. But then yeah, there were some experiences where other people would almost like, yeah, like other you. They would make you the odd one out. And so like I remember being at like I think it was our Christmas party as an example, and like someone kind of commenting something about the shopping ban. And then she also talked about the fact that I don't drink. Like, and she was saying this to like our co-founder, and I'm like, this guy does not need to know this stuff about me. Like, why are you telling him all of this? And like you start to understand like it's more I think like a lot of her comments weren't even about me, but they're just like she literally can't comprehend that I'm not doing these things. So there were like, a few situations, I guess, with people that you could see like almost like, yeah, you not doing something kind of forces them to, or like it's confronting to them for some reason. And they don't like it. And so they kind of call you out or like make fun of you for it. And yeah, I mean, like, still to this day, I get comments like that, or it could be about drinking, probably more than anything, but like, you still get that occasionally. And it's kind of mind blowing that like people even care enough to comment, but they do.
Yeah, well, it's all very countercultural and it hits people in a different way. Like even I think minor personal finance things like are viewed as strange by a lot of people. Like a lot of people look at me strangely when I say like, "Oh, I don't have a car payment." Like they're like, "What?
Hmm.
Like what do you even like that?" And that's pretty basic,
Right.
And then when you get more into it, like, I don't go around telling people like, "Hey, I have zero debt." Like that's a weird
Yeah.
thing in today's culture. Yeah, and then you get into stuff like minimalism, which I think makes a lot of sense. That's very countercultural. And I think anytime someone does something out of the norm, it kind of like rubs people the wrong way sometimes. Just because it's a
Right. And
challenge to them, to their
it
lifestyle.
it is. Well, and it's more like that's how they take it. Because something I think about is like, I don't think I've ever like intentionally thought like
Right.
what I'm saying is you're all doing it
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So it's like I don't care what anyone else does. Like I don't even think to the point where like I think in some ways I'm like I don't even know what's normal for people or culturally normal anymore because I'm like it's I just do what I'm doing and like it's fine. Whatever anyone else is doing is totally fine. I remember I had a friend say that she was worried when I came over that I would judge her house or something because she had stuff. And I'm like, what? Like I literally could not care less what is in your
Yeah, yeah,
house.
yeah.
Like that. So I don't think about those things, but it does something for other people. Like other people and not everyone, but some people seem to take it as almost like, yeah, a challenge or like a criticism or something. It is just interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So talking a little bit about minimalism. So you do have a minimalist philosophy. So, what is that philosophy? Why did you take that on? Like what has it done for you?
Oh gosh. Well, now I'm kind of like, what's my philosophy? Like, I feel I think I did just write something about this like a year or so ago, and I don't know. I guess like it was probably a little different when I first did the shopping ban. I do think like it was potentially like a little bit not extreme, but like it's sort of like the pendulum swung from one way or one end to the other, and now I'm somewhere in the middle. So I feel like, what was true during the shopping ban was I at the same time I did like, wasn't buying anything. I also went through all of my stuff, and over the year, I decluttered something like 70 or 75% of my belongings. Now, that sounds like a lot. I still like, if you'd walked into my home, well, parts of it probably would have looked pretty sparse, mostly because I just never put things on the wall. I don't really know why that was true, but like I wouldn't really hang pictures or anything. But I still had stuff, and I didn't feel like I was living without anything. I think I just felt like I only had the essentials, and I did not have things unless I really, really needed them. So now I would say I'm somewhere in the middle where, I do like, because back then I got rid of so much, like I didn't even really have anything that could have been like home decor, like anything that could have just made a room actually like a little nicer and a little warmer. And I do have some stuff like that now. It's still not much, but I don't like, I think like as I've gotten older, time's gone on. I'm like, no, I don't want nothing. I do want my house to feel warm and comfortable and inviting. I want it to feel like me. So it's like I do have some stuff, but I think the biggest thing, and this is still true of how I live, is like I don't browse. And when I reflect on the shopping ban in general, actually like I feel like it wasn't a shopping ban necessarily. I think the biggest habit that changed was I stopped browsing, which means like I stopped looking for things and it's still true today and sometimes to my detriment because like I will actually need something and all of a sudden I'm like I don't even know where to look for that thing. Like I don't even know how to begin browsing for something because it's because I live in a different country now. I immigrated to the UK and I just don't know all the stores here. So like I literally don't know where to buy things. But yeah, it's like I've sort of lost the ability to browse and actually feel quite overwhelmed by it. So sometimes I'm like, it makes shopping hard because I'm like let's say I need some new clothes. I can find it hard because like I find the idea of browsing really exhausting. But yeah, I guess it's just like I'm not anti stuff and I'm not like I don't live with nothing. And I also think it's okay to have things in your home that are just like beautiful or warm or they make it feel nice. Like I think that that's fine. But I don't browse for extra. Like I'm never looking for more things. Like I'm good with what I have.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it sounds like you're just mindful about your spending. Like, you buy something when you really need it. And I think that's
Yeah.
like the long-term impact of it when you really need it or it really brings you joy. Like you're not just buying kind of junk. I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all these insights. Before we wrap up, do you have any parting words of wisdom for the audience?
No, I would say go for a walk because that's what I'm about to do.
Awesome. Good advice.
Thanks for the chat.
All right.
This
Well,
was really nice.
thanks for your time today.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. For more information, please go to securityanalysis.org. Subscribers to the website get early ad-free access to podcast episodes in addition to weekly in-depth profiles of companies.